You know, it's not enough that I do a bunch of coverage ahead of Worlds talking about the ticketing thing and all sorts of other stuff. It's not enough that then I go do a 5-show tour across 3 cities, that I'm gone from my wonderful apartment for an entire month, that I am just working long hours doing all this stuff. I finally get home and I think now I can rest. And then everybody starts going predictions video, predictions video, predictions video. And so here I am with your predictions video. And before you pull out your popcorn, well, there we go. Hello? That's very bright. Okay, never mind. Whatever. This is popcorn. Before you pull out your popcorn and you are saying to yourself, oh boy, it's finally here, I have to warn you, it's not as spicy as before. This offseason is not going to be, hey, we're taking these 2 awesome European MVPs and bringing them over here and like a player from China. At least that's not how it feels yet. The biggest news was obviously that 100T rumored roster that I talked about last night. You can go watch that video if you haven't yet. I assume you have if you're watching this video. It's just a very different time in the LCS, and in some ways a better time and sometimes a worse time, as we'll get into over the course of this video. I think one of the context-setting things here is that teams are spending, so they're not going to go get a bunch of multi-million-dollar contracts for, I don't know, big names over there, right? Like, Upset's not probably coming to the LCS unless something changed. I think he already said he's taking a split off or whatever because of this. Like, that's an example of a player who previously maybe get offered multiple millions of dollars, would come over here, then go back to LEC right afterwards. Reckless, that type of thing. Like, there's just not, you're not seeing that anymore in the league, which is probably good. Even if in 2023 teams are going to be cheaper, I don't know if they're going to be smarter. So let's get into it. So, context setting again. If you watched last year's video, you know this. But if you don't, these are all predictions. What I take in this video that I do now, this is my second year of doing it, is I take a big ladle, whatever those things are called, a big spoon, and I stick it into the primordial soup of LCS offseason, and I pull some stuff out, and using what I've pulled out, I try to make a prediction on what the flavor, consistency, and I don't know, overall theme of the dish will be, even while it's still cooking, and just by looking at what I've got in the spoon. So that means that these are all predictions. We'll talk about later on how well I did in these predictions. I have, I should say, less confidence in these predictions than I did last year because of how weird off-season is right now in the LCS. So do not take these as reports. And if you see anybody elsewhere on Reddit or Twitter or social media saying, Travis said this is happening, understand and please correct them that it is a prediction. All right, number 1. At least one team in the LCS will go full Korean-speaking roster. Maybe as much as having their coach as well be Korean-speaking. I would look at Reaper as a potential option for said team. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm curious to see how people feel about this. I talked about this at this rumor at a Red Bull event in New York during Worlds because it was already sort of starting to materialize there. And by the way, I've heard that this could be the potential for more than one team. But let's just settle on one team for this prediction. I talked about it at that Red Bull thing, and the audience groaned collectively. Now, I should say that this is not like a full import roster. Like, news to some people, there are people who live in North America who speak Korean, but are not, immediately from Korea. So you can have North American players who just happen to speak Korean who could play on this team. Prediction number 2. Impact leaves EG. I know this is not that bold because this has been talked about, and nothing I believe is finalized yet because free agency hasn't hit, and some of you probably don't realize that free agency, which is on the 22nd, is when things could actually start materializing. I like to pretend that enough of you know this now because I've harped on it in a ton of my videos, but if not, ask around. People will explain. So we won't know until then, but I do not anticipate, in fact, I predict that Impact will not be on EG. Next up, and this is going to be a heartbreaker for some people, but prediction number 3, CLG does not keep their full roster. I know a lot of people, including myself, were kind of hoping that they would do this. I loved that roster. In summer, I felt like they made leaps and bounds to get to where they are, but You can't fault a team for trying to look for upgrades where it makes sense. And I believe that that is what they're going to be doing here. No guarantees yet on what that ends up looking like, but I just don't think that they'll be running back the 5 players. Again, nothing's decided. Maybe that'll change. That's where we're at right now. Prediction number 4 will not be a big surprise to anybody, but I think I'm going to add some extra context to it, which is that player salaries are going to drop dramatically. Now, this does not mean that we're going to see big names leave the league. I also don't think it necessarily means that there won't be players out there that are commanding pretty big salaries. In fact, we'll get into that later. But I think across the board, all teams are waiting longer to sign players. Normally, whenever you try to lock somebody up really quickly, you're throwing a ton of money at them. I think part of the reason why LCS offseason has felt slower this year is because a lot of people are just waiting and seeing, what can we get for a little bit cheaper? What's going to be out there? If we don't rush to sign this person, or we put the offer out there and we're okay with them saying no, because maybe they'll go to a different team, like they're just not going to have that. I've also heard that there are some teams out there, I would imagine maybe the ones I would look at, even though I know somebody from one of these orgs has already disputed this, is that Dig, Immortals, TSM, I expect those to be kind of floating their competitive budgets around the range at which Riot pays all these teams back, which I've heard in the past is somewhere around 2 to 3 million. So I'm not talking about just for the players, but I also mean like running the whole division as a bit of a break even just off that Riot money. We can talk about whether or not that's a good thing or not. I don't know, whatever you can decide, but I think that's what you're going to see, which means that you'll see some rosters that are they're pretty close to minimum in terms of salary. I've even heard some players are getting re-signed to the existing team, potentially even with a lower salary. So that's, I think, going to be something I would predict for this offseason. Pretty confident in that one. Prediction number 5. Fudge, Blabber, and Berserker all stay on C9. Now, this is a risky one. In fact, last year, I was pretty sure of my C9 roster all the way up until right at the end, whenever Ellis came in and changed it all last minute. Made me look like a goofball, but then he gave me credit later on for getting it right. But I'm fairly confident that the core of C9 are going to be staying. Now, I know Jack has also mentioned that Berserker wants Ven to be there, so I haven't heard any interest or anything to the contrary. But I'm just going to say that, like, at least these 3 I feel pretty confident in. Who knows? Jack does crazy things. He's often the hardest for me to pin down, but these predictions are not fun if there's no risk, right? Prediction number 6. We got FlyQuest having a very different roster. Now, this is, again, a little bit of a bummer because I like that roster a lot, and I don't know if Takui's going to be on it next year. He was, I think, the standout probably. But they kind of developed a bit of a cult following amongst the LCS fans, and I do not anticipate that most, maybe not even any, but at least most of those players will be on that roster next year. Prediction number 7 is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be happy about because I think Solo has a starting team next year, and I believe that team is going to be TSM. Now, again, it's early. We'll see. But obviously, he played for them previously, and it went pretty well. I think most people know that like Chime and Maple are almost certainly getting the run back on TSM. So this would obviously see 3 of those players coming back for next year, and that's where I think Solo will be for TSM. So that's my prediction. Finally, we got prediction 8, which is top lane is going to return to being the highest paid position, mostly because of Someday and Impact. So for a long time, top lane was kind of commanding the most. In fact, kind of because of Someday and Impact, I believe. And then mid lane kind of took over for a while, where you had like Jensen signing a big contract, Pearson coming back, blah, blah, blah. I think based off everything that I'm hearing is that the hot commodities right now are going to be Someday and Impact in this offseason. So we will see what they're able to command, but I think so many people want to play with them, and top lane's a really interesting role. And you've got these rumors about multiple teams going for full Korean-speaking rosters. They obviously speak Korean. So I think that those 2 alone are going to make sure that top lane is the highest paid position. I also think core could command a decent amount. We'll see, but I believe that at the very least it'll be top lane. So that leads us to some open questions that I have right now, which is where are Closer, Santorin, and Jensen going to be? I think there's a decent chance, it's not a prediction, but we're just going to put it in here at the end. I think there's a decent chance that Jensen starts spring without a team again. Because there's been reports, obviously, I think it was Wulu. I apologize. It's hard to keep track of who reported what, and I'm probably a jerk for not keeping better track. Go follow all the wonderful reporters that are covering offseason and are oftentimes more talented than I am. But regardless, there's obviously some rumors that C9 is changing out their mid laner. And so I have big questions on where Jensen's going to end up. Does he decide to sit out for spring again? Maybe last year gave him the confidence to do it again. I also think Closer and Santorin are really big names that are potentially able to float around. I mean, Closer was pretty close to MVP candidate, Santorin as well. All-star junglers, where will they end up? So I don't know. We'll see how things go. Those are the big things that I am looking at right now. But again, I don't know. A lot of the stuff that I'm hearing this offseason, I would not expect fans to be excited to see all this rush of North American talent coming in. I think a lot of the teams are somewhat disconnected from what the fans are clamoring for. And you can have your own conversation about what that is. That's part of the reason why I say LCS next year will be cheaper, but not smarter. Unless you are a GM or team owner of an LCS team, in which case, I mean, every team except for you, because I'm really excited. You're making the best decision ever, and I can't wait to watch your team lift the trophy at the end of spring. Anyway, we're going to do some more off-season stuff on the channel, but hopefully people enjoy this video. I know, it is not as spicy, but listen, I can only do as much as I get access to. I can't just, invent fakers coming to North America because you want something spicy. It's maybe a chiller, calmer, more rounded off-season, which is maybe going to be good for the league. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Anyway, see you all. Subscribe. Thank you to Alienware for sponsoring this video. Go check them out. They do a bunch of really cool stuff. And buying from this link that I'm pointing at right now actually really helps out the channel. They make amazing hardware, which allows me to make somewhat amazing content. I'll let you decide. But thank you so much to Alienware for sponsoring this. Thank you, everybody, for subscribing, and we'll see you all later.